The station shook hard, and Sergeant Maya Chun grabbed the wall to keep herself from falling red. Lights were flashing everywhere, and the alarm was screaming so loud she could barely think. She had been a peacekeeper for 6 years, and she had seen bad situations before, but this was different. Pirates had come out of nowhere, and they had hit Station Vera 7 with everything they had. The orbital station was breaking apart around her, and she needed to move fast. Maya checked her combat exosuit and saw that the damage was bad but not terrible. She could still walk, and she could still fight, and that was enough for now. Her orders were simple: get to the civilian evacuation zone and help people escape. She ran through the corridors and stepped over broken metal and sparking wires. The gravity was failing in some sections, and she had to push herself along the walls. She passed bodies on the floor, and she wanted to stop, but she knew she could not help them now. The living needed her more than the dead. Maya reached the evacuation zone, and her heart sank when she saw it was empty. The last transport ship was already gone, and she had missed it by maybe 5 minutes. The docking bay was wrecked, and there was no way another ship could land. Here she stood there for a moment and let the reality hit her. She was stuck on a dying station with no way out, but then she heard something that made her freeze. It was a sound so small and so scared that she almost missed Ida crying sound. Like a child who had lost everything, Maya turned and ran toward the sound without thinking. She found herself in what used to be the nursery wing of the station. The ceiling had collapsed in several places, and the temperature was dropping fast. Station was venting atmosphere somewhere nearby, and the cold was creeping in. And there in the corner, huddled together under a broken table, she found them. 3 small creatures with silver blue fur and enormous eyes that reflected the emergency lights. They were Velith cubs, barely older than human toddlers. Maya had worked with Velith before, and she knew they were a gentle species. These cubs were terrified and shaking, and the smallest one was clutching a burnt blanket. Maya looked around for their parents, but she saw no one. She checked the room carefully and found what she was afraid of. Finding the parents had not survived the attack, Maya knelt down slowly so she would not scare the cubs even more. The biggest one, a female with darker fur, pushed the 2 smaller ones behind her. She was trying to protect them, even though she was just a child herself. Maya held up her hands to show she meant no harm. "It is okay," she said softly, hoping her translator would carry the meaning. "I am here to help you." The cubs did not move at first. The smallest one, a female with violet eyes, kept crying and would not let go of her blanket. The male cub in the middle was shaking so hard Maya could see it from where she stood, but the older female looked at Maya with something like hope in her eyes. Maybe she understood that this human was their only chance. Maya checked her suit computer, and the news was not good. Her life support was damaged and losing power slowly. The temperature outside her suit was dropping fast. She had maybe 2 hours before the cold would kill the cubs. Velith were warm-blooded like humans, but they were small, and they would freeze much faster. Maya had to think, and she had to think now. She looked at her suit. She looked at the cubs, and she made a decision. It was against every rule she had ever learned. Opening your combat suit in a hostile environment was something you never did, but rules were made by people who were not watching 3 children freeze to death. Maya reached for her chest plate and began the unsealing process. Her suit beeped warnings at her, and she ignored them. The chest cavity of her exosuit had an emergency thermal core. It was meant to keep the soldier alive in extreme cold. It was small and cramped, but it was warm. Maya opened the cavity and felt the cold air rush in. She gasped at how fast the heat left her body, but she did not close the suit. Instead, she knelt down again and opened her arms to the cubs. "Come here," she said as gently as she could. "I will keep you warm." The older female understood first. She chirped something to the younger ones and then slowly walked toward Maya. Her small paws were cold against Maya's hands as she helped the cub climb into the suit. The male came next. still shaking but following his sister's lead. The smallest one would not move at first. She sat there crying and holding her blanket like it was all she had left. Maya waited and did not push. Finally, the little one looked at her siblings inside the warm armor. She looked at Maya with those big violet eyes, and then she crawled forward and climbed in too. Blanket and all the three cubs fit inside Maya's chest cavity, but barely. They pressed against her body through her undershirt, and she could feel how cold they were. They were shaking against her ribs, and their small hearts were beating so fast. Maya sealed the suit carefully, and the warmth began to return. The cubs stopped shaking after a few minutes. The smallest one had stopped crying and was now just whimpering softly. Maya stood up slowly, feeling the extra weight against her chest. It was strange to carry three living creatures inside her armor. She could feel them breathing against her, and it was the strangest feeling she had ever known. But there was no time to think about that now. She needed to find the emergency beacon on the other side of the station. It was a long walk through broken corridors and failing gravity. Her suit was damaged and her power was low, and she was carrying precious cargo. But Maya-chan was a human, and humans did not give up. She took her first step toward the beacon inside her armor. Three alien children pressed close to her heart. They did not know her name or her language or her world, but they knew she was warm and she was strong, and she was holding them safe. Maya began the long walk through the dying station, and she made a promise in her heart that she would not break. She would carry these children through the dark. She would keep them alive no matter what it cost her, because that was what humans did. They held on, and they did not let go. The corridors of Station Vera 7 stretched out before Maya like a frozen maze. Every step she took echoed in the empty halls, and the sound made her feel very alone. But she was not alone, because three small hearts were beating against her chest. The cubs had stopped shaking, and their bodies were warming up inside her armor. Maya was glad for that, but she knew the warmth was coming from somewhere. Her suit's thermal core was working hard to keep the cubs alive, and that meant it was pulling power away from her own heating systems. She felt the cold creeping into her fingers. First it started as a tingling feeling, and then turned into numbness. Her feet came next, and she had to concentrate hard just to keep walking. The suit's computer kept flashing warnings at her, but she ignored them all. It told her that her core temperature was dropping. It told her that she needed to restore heat to her own body. It told her that she was going to die if she kept going like this. Maya turned off the warnings and kept walking. The station was dark in many places, and she had to use her suit's lights to see. Some corridors were blocked by fallen metal, and she had to find other ways around. The gravity failed completely in one section, and she had to pull herself along the walls. The cubs shifted inside her armor when she moved, and she could feel their confusion. They did not understand what was happening or where they were going. All they knew was that it was warm inside the suit and cold outside. After 3 hours of walking, the smallest cub woke up and started to panic. Maya could feel her tiny paws scratching against the inside of the armor. The little one was crying again, and her cries echoed inside the metal shell. Maya stopped walking and pressed her hand against her chest plate. "It is okay, little one," she said softly. "You are safe with me." The cub did not understand her words, but maybe she understood the tone. Crying got quieter but did not stop completely. Then Maya heard the older female cub make a chirping sound. Her translator picked up the sound and tried to make sense of it. The cub was saying a word over and over. Sola. Maya realized it was a name. Sola. Maya repeated, "Is that her name?" The older cub chirped again, and this time the translator worked better. "Sola is scared," the cub said. "Sola wants mother." Maya felt her heart break a little at those words. She could not bring their mother back, but she could try to make them feel safe. "What is your name?" Maya asked the older cub. There was a pause, and then a chirp. "Neth." "And the other one?" "The male." "Tyrek," Neth answered. Tyrek is brave, but Tyrek is also scared. Maya smiled even though no one could see it. I am Maya, she said, and I'm going to get you out of here. She started walking again, and this time she talked as she walked. She did not know if the cubs could understand everything she said, but she had read somewhere that if cubs found comfort in vibrations, her voice would travel through the armor and reach their small bodies. So she talked about anything she could think of. She told them about Earth, the planet where she was born. She described the forest that stretched for miles and miles. She told them about rain, how water fell from the sky and made everything green. She talked about her grandmother's house in a place called Sichuan. It was in the mountains where the peaks were so high they touched the clouds. Her grandmother had a garden there, and Maya had spent her childhood playing in it. Cubs grew quiet as she talked, and Maya could feel them relaxing against her neck. Seemed to be translating some of what Maya said to the younger ones. Tyrek stopped shaking, and Sola's crying faded to soft breathing. Maya kept talking. Even as her lips grew numb from the cold 6 hours into the walk, she heard something that made her freeze. Footsteps. Ahead of her in the corridor, heavy footsteps that did not sound like rescue teams. Pirates were still on the station, and they were hunting for survivors. Maya pressed herself against the wall and held her breath. She could feel the cubs shifting inside her armor, sensing her fear. Be very quiet, she whispered. Please be very quiet. The cubs went still. 3 small hearts that had been beating fast suddenly seemed to slow down. Maya watched through a crack in the wall as 2 pirates walked past. They were carrying thermal scanners that could detect body heat. Maya's suit was damaged, but its outer shell was still masking most of her heat signature. Cubs inside her armor were hidden completely. The pirates stopped just a few meters away from her. One of them checked his scanner and frowned. Nothing here, he said. The cold must be messing with the readings. Forget it. The other one said, we got what we came for. Let us go. They walked away, and Maya did not move for a long time. When she was sure they were gone, she let out a breath. She did not know she was holding inside her armor. Soa made a tiny sound. It was not a cry this time. It sounded almost like a purr. Maya smiled and started walking again. 10 hours passed, and then 12, and then 14. Maya lost feeling in her hands completely, and her feet were just blocks of ice. Her suit told her that her core temperature had dropped to dangerous level. She was hypothermic and getting worse with every hour, but the cubs were warm, and that was all that mattered. 16 hours after she started walking, Maya saw the emergency beacon ahead. It was a small room with a transmitter that could send a signal across the stars. She had made it. She stumbled into the room and fell to her knees. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the controls, but she managed to activate the beacon and send out a distress call. Then she collapsed on the floor. Her vision was going dark, and she could not feel her body anymore, but with her last bit of strength, she curled herself around her chest plate. She wrapped her frozen arms around the place where the cubs were sleeping. She would protect them even in death. If she had to, the last thing she heard before everything went black was Neth's voice. The cub was chirping softly against her chest. Maya did not understand the words, but she understood the feeling. It was a thank you. It was a promise. It was 3 small lives saying that they would hold on if she would. Maya closed her eyes and let the darkness take her, but even in the cold and the dark, she did not let go. She never let go. The rescue team from the coalition cruiser Adamantine found Maya 18 hours after her distress signal went out. They had to cut through 3 sealed doors to reach the beacon room. When they finally got inside, they found something they did not expect. A human soldier was lying on the floor, frozen nearly solid. Her combat suit was dead and covered in frost, but she was curled around her own chest like she was protecting something precious. The team leader, a tall alien named Commander Voss, knelt beside her. She is alive, he said with surprise in his voice. Barely, but alive. His team moved in to remove the frozen armor from Maya's body. They had special tools that could cut through the metal without hurting the person inside. But when they started to open the chest plate, something happened that shocked them all. 3 small Velith cubs exploded out of the armor like angry little storms. They hissed and scratched and bit at anyone who came close to Maya, the smallest one. A female with violet eyes was the fiercest of them all. She stood on Maya's chest and screamed at the rescue team. Her tiny claws were out and her fur was standing up on end. Team backed away in confusion. "What in the stars?" Lost said. "Where did they come from?" One of his medics scanned the cubs and shook her head in amazement. "They were inside her suit," she said. "She was carrying them in her thermal core." Voss looked at the frozen human on the floor and then at the cubs protecting her. He had seen many things in his long career, but nothing quite like this. The older cub, the one called Neth, finally seemed to recognize that the rescue team was not a threat. She chirped something to the younger ones, and they slowly backed down. But they did not leave Maya's side, even as the medics worked to stabilize her. The cubs stayed close. They watched everything with their big eyes, and they did not trust anyone. Maya was taken to the medical bay of the Adamantine and put in a special tank. Her body temperature had dropped to 31 degrees any lower and she would have died. The doctor said it was a miracle she had survived at all. They said her will to live must have been incredibly strong. The cubs were not allowed in the medical bay, but they refused to leave. They sat outside the window and watched Maya floating in the healing tank. Hours passed and then days, and they did not move. Other crew members brought them food and blankets, but the cubs barely noticed. All they did was watch the human who had saved them on the second day. Velith officials arrived on the ship. They were cultural attaches sent to collect the orphaned cubs. A tall Velith female named Ambassador Theron led the group. She looked at the cubs sitting by the window, and her expression was troubled. "This is very unusual," she said to Commander Voss. "Cubs this young should not be able to survive separation from their parents." "What do you mean?" Voss Askedtherin explained that Velith cubs formed deep bonds with their parents. When those bonds were broken suddenly, the cubs often died from the trauma. It was a biological response that no one had ever been able to stop. "These 3 should be dead or dying," Darren said. "But look at them." The cubs were sad and scared, but they were not fading away. They were watching Maya with the same intensity that cubs usually reserve for their mothers. "They have bonded with the human," Theron said slowly. "I have never seen this happen before." On the 3rd day, Maya finally woke up. Her body was still weak, but her mind was clear. The first thing she asked about was the cubs when the doctors told her they were safe. She cried with relief. The cubs were brought to see her, and the reunion was something the whole crew talked about for years. Direk ran to her bed and climbed up before anyone could stop him. Sola came next. Still carrying her old burnt blanket, Neth walked slowly and with dignity, but her eyes were shining with happiness. Maya held them all and did not let go for a long time, but the happy moment did not last. Ambassador Theron came to Maya's room later that day. She explained that under Velith law, orphan cubs had to return to the homeworld. They would be placed in institutions and raised by the state, and because they had different aptitude scores, they would be separate. Tedric would go to one facility and Sola to another and Neth to a third. They would probably never see each other again. Maya listened to all of this with a cold feeling growing in her chest. "No," she said. When Theron finished speaking, Thurin blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, Sergeant Chen, but this is not your decision to make." "I said no," Maya repeated. "I am not letting you take them. You have no legal standing," Theron said patiently. "Humans cannot adopt Velith children. I do not care about legal standing." Maya sat up in her bed even though her body protested. The cubs pressed closer to her. Sensing the tension in the room, "I carried these children through 16 hours of hell. Maya said. I almost died keeping him alive. That is admirable, but it does not change the law. Then the law is wrong. Theron stared at her for a long moment. What exactly are you saying, Sergeant? Maya looked down at the three cubs in her arms. Direk was trying to look brave. Solo was clutching her blanket and watching with worried eyes. Neth was completely calm, as if she had known this moment would come. I am saying that I made a promise in the dark, Maya said. I promised I would keep them safe. She looked up at Theron with steel in her eyes. And I intend to keep that promise, no matter what it takes. Theron was quiet for a long time. Then she sighed and shook her head. You do not know what you are asking for, she said. The elders on Velith Prime will never allow this. Then I will go to Velith Prime and talk to them myself. They will refuse you. Let them try. Theron looked at Maya and then at the cubs, who were holding on to her like she was their whole world. She had worked in diplomacy for 50 years. She had seen stubbornness in many species, but she had never seen anything quite like the look in this human's eyes. It was the look of someone who would burn down the entire galaxy before letting go. Very well, Theron said finally. I will arrange transport to the homeworld. She paused at the door and looked back. But I want you to understand something, Sergeant Chun. What is that? You are about to fight the oldest laws of my people. And you are going to do it alone. Maya smiled and held the cubs closer. I am not alone, she said. I have them. And that, she knew, was enough. The Hall of Lineages on Velith Prime was the oldest building on the planet. It had stood for over 2,000 years, and the weight of history pressed down on everyone who entered. Maya Chun walked through the great doors and felt very small. The ceiling was so high she could barely see it. Ancient carvings covered every wall, telling stories of Velith heroes from long ago. And at the far end of the massive hall sat the Council of Elders. There were 7 of them, all very old, their fur turned white or gray with centuries of life. They watched Maya approach with expressions that showed nothing, no warmth and no anger and no curiosity, just a patient look of beings who had seen countless petitioners come and go. Maya stopped at the speaking circle in the center of the hall. This was where she would make her case. Ambassador Theron stood to the side as her official translator. The cubs were not allowed in the hall, which made Maya's heart ache, but she had promised Neth she would come back for them, and Maya Chun did not break her promises. The eldest of the elders, a female named High Mother Vareth, spoke first. You are the human who wishes to claim our children, she said. Her voice was like dry leaves rustling in the wind. I am, Maya answered. You understand that under our law, you have no standing here. I understand that is what your law says. A murmur went through the elders at her tone of wrath raised. One ancient hand in silence fell. Explain to us why you believe you deserve these cubs. Maya had prepared for this question. She had spent the entire journey to Velith Prime studying their laws and customs, and she had found something that gave her hope. I invoke Kethensal, she said. The reaction was immediate. The elders leaned forward and their expressions finally showed something. Sir Persevereth's old eyes widened slightly. You know of Kethensal? She asked. I do, Maya said. It is the bond of survival. She recited the ancient word she had memorized. Any being who carries a Velith child through mortal peril may claim kinship, if the child chooses them in return. That law was written for Velith heroes of old. One of the other elders said, the law does not say it is only for Velith. Maya replied, I have read it many times to be certain. The elders looked at each other with uncertainty. They had not expected this human to know their ancient customs. Varth spoke again, a voice harder now. Even if you can invoke Kethensal, you must prove that mortal peril occurred. I can prove it, Maya said. She pulled out a small device from her pocket. It was the black box recorder from her combat suit. This contains a complete recording of everything that happened on Station Vera 7. She said, I request permission to show it to the council. Vareth nodded slowly. The hall's projection system activated and suddenly, Maya's memories filled the room. The elders watched everything. They saw Maya find the cubs in the ruined nursery. They saw her open her armor and let them climb inside. They watched her walk for 16 hours through the frozen station. The recording showed her vital signs dropping hour by hour, her body temperature falling as she gave all her heat to the cubs. They heard her talking to the children about earth and rain and her grandmother's garden. They heard her singing softly when the cubs were scared. They watched the moment when the pirates passed by, and everyone held their breath, and they saw her collapse. At the beacon, curling around the cubs with her last strength when the recording ended. The hall was completely silent. Maya looked at the elders and saw that something had changed in their faces. Some of them looked moved, others looked confused, and a few looked almost ashamed, but Varath's expression was still unreadable. This proves that peril occurred, she admitted, but it does not change what you are. And what am I? Maya asked. You are human, Vera said. Your species lives for less than a century. You are prone to violence, and your emotions are chaotic and unpredictable. Is that what you see when you look at me? It is what our scholars have documented about your kind. Maya felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. Getting angry would not help the cubs. Your scholars are wrong, she said calmly. Or at least they are not seeing the whole picture. Explain. Maya took a deep breath. Yes, humans have short lives, she said, but that makes us treasure every moment more. We know that our time is limited, so we love harder and fight harder for what matters. She paused and looked at each elder in turn. Yes, we can be violent, she continued, but we use that violence to protect the ones we love. I would burn down worlds for those 3 children, and I am not ashamed of that. And yes, we are emotional, she finished. But emotions are not weakness. Emotions are what drove me to open my suit in a freezing corridor. Emotions are what kept me walking when my body wanted to give up. Emotions are why I am standing here now, fighting for cubs who are not even my species. The hall was silent again then. Vareth asked the question Maya had been waiting for. Why? The old one said. Why would you risk death for children you had never met before? Why do you fight so hard? For them even now. Why do you care? Maya smiled sadly. Because they climbed into my arms, she said, and I held them. That is all it takes. That is all it has ever taken. Vera stared at her for a long time. The cubs must be brought before us, she finally said. They must make their choice. Maya's heart began to beat faster. This was the moment that would decide everything. The great doors opened and Tyrek, Sola, and Neth were led into the hall. They looked so small in the massive space. Sola was clutching her blanket and staying close to her siblings. Tyrek was trying to stand tall and look brave. Neth walked with quiet dignity. Her eyes fixed on Mayavareth, spoke to them in the Veleth language. Children, you have a choice to make today. You can choose the safety of tradition, to be raised on your homeworld among your own kind, or you can choose this human, who is not of your blood or your world. What do you choose? The cubs did not hesitate. They did not even look at the elders. All 3 of them walked straight to Maya and pressed against her legs. Tyrek looked up at Vareth with fire in his young eyes. She kept us warm, he said. She is our mother now. Sola did not speak, but she reached up and took Maya's hand. Her small paw wrapped around Maya's fingers and held on tight, and Neth spoke last. Her voice clear and strong for one so young. We already chose, she said. We chose her in the dark when she carried us. We choose her now in the light. We will choose her every day for the rest of our lives. The elders looked at each other. Some of them were nodding slowly, others had tears in their ancient eyes. Vareth closed her eyes for a moment when she opened them again. There was something new in her expression. It might have been respect. The cubs have made their choice, she said, and the law is clear. Under Kethensal, the bond of survival is recognized. Maya-chan, you are hereby granted kinship with these children. They are yours to raise and protect as your own. Maya felt her legs go weak with relief. She knelt down and gathered the cubs into her arms. Styric was laughing and Sola was crying happy tears. Neth pressed her forehead against Maya's cheek in the Velith gesture of deep love. Thank you, Maya whispered to the elders. Varth nodded once. Take good care of them, human, she said. You have made a promise that will last the rest of your life. Maya held her children close and smiled through her own tears. I know, she said, and I would not have it any other way. 5 years had passed since the day Maya-chan walked out of the Hall of Lineages with 3 small cubs holding her hands. A lot had changed in those 5 years. Maya had retired from the peacekeeping corps and used her savings to buy a small house on a colony world called New Sichuan. The planet had been named by settlers from Earth who thought the mountains looked like the ones back home. They were right about that. The peaks rose so high that clouds wrapped around them like scarves, and Maya had built her home right at the edge of those mountains. She had a garden there, just like her grandmother used to have. It was not as big as she wanted it to be because 3 growing children took up a lot of space, but it was enough on this particular morning. Maya sat on her porch and watched the sunrise paint the mountains. Gold. The house behind her was filled with the sounds of cows. Tyrek was 12 years old now, and he had grown tall and strong. His silver blue fur had darkened a little, and his voice was starting to change. Right now he was arguing with Sola about something ridiculous. I did not eat your paint. He was saying, why would I eat paint? Because you eat everything. Sola shot back. You ate my homework last week. That was an accident. How do you accidentally eat homework? Maya smiled and shook her head. Sola was 10 now, and she had become quite the artist. Her room was covered in paintings and drawings. Some of them showed the mountains of New Sichuan. Some showed Earth places she had never been, painted from Maya's descriptions, and some showed a space station that she barely remembered in those paintings. There was always a figure in armor, carrying something precious. Neth appeared on the porch beside Maya. She was 13, and she had become the peacekeeper of the family. Every argument between her siblings somehow ended up being resolved by her. Other children in the colony looked up to her too. She had a way of making everyone feel heard and understood. They are fighting about paint again, Neth said calmly. I noticed. Maya replied, I will handle it. I know you will. Neth smiled and went back inside. A moment later, the shouting stopped and was replaced by laughter. Maya did not know how Neth did it, but she was grateful. She had learned a lot about parenting in the past 5 years. Mostly, she had learned that children were unpredictable and exhausting and wonderful. Raising 3 alien cubs as a single human mother had not been easy. There were times when she had no idea what she was doing. Vleth children had different needs than human children. They needed more physical affection and more reassurance. Their emotions worked differently, and their bodies needed different food. Maya had made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, but she had also gotten a lot of help. The Velith cultural observers came to visit every few months. At first, they had been suspicious of her. They expected to find the cubs struggling and unhappy. Instead, they found 3 children who were thriving. The observers could not explain it by every measure they used. Cubs raised by aliens should have problems, but Tyrek and Sola and Neth showed no signs of trauma or disconnection. They spoke fluent Mandarin alongside their native Velith language. They celebrated human holidays and Velith remembrance days. They called Maya Ma-chan, a name they had invented themselves. It meant something like mother protector in their understanding. The observers eventually stopped trying to explain it. Some things could not be measured by tests and studies. A young woman arrived at the house that afternoon. Her name was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, and she was a diplomat from the Galactic Coalition. She had been sent to study what she called the Chun case. Apparently, Maya had become somewhat famous in certain circles, a human who had successfully adopted 3 alien children was rare enough to attract attention. Maya found the attention annoying, but she put up with it. Maybe the research would help other families like hers. Someday Dr. Tanaka sat with Maya on the porch while the children played in the garden. Track was chasing Sola through the vegetable row. Sola was screaming with laughter and throwing handfuls of dirt at him. Neth sat under a tree reading a book, occasionally looking up to make sure no one got hurt. I have to admit, Dr. Tanaka said, this is not what I expected. What did you expect? Maya asked. I am not sure, but not this. She gestured at the peaceful scene before them. They seem so happy and so normal. They are happy. Maya said, I do not know about normal. Can I ask you something, Sergeant Chun? It is just Maya now. And yes, you can ask. Dr. Tanaka leaned forward with curiosity in her eyes. How did you do it? She asked. How did you raise 3 alien children alone? Across species and culture and every obstacle the galaxy threw at you. What is the secret? Maya watched her children playing in the garden. Trick had caught Sola and was now tickling her while she shrieked. Neth had put down her book and was walking over to rescue her sister. In a moment there would be a pile of laughing children on the grass. There was no secret. Maya said finally, you just hold on. You keep them warm. And you never, ever let go. Dr. Tanaka wrote something in her notebook, but Maya could tell she did not really understand. That was okay. Some things had to be lived to be understood. That night, a thunderstorm rolled over New Sichuan. Lightning lit up the sky and thunder shook the walls of the little house. Maya lay in her bed and listened to the rain pounding on the roof. She was almost asleep when her door creaked open. Tyrek stood there looking embarrassed. The thunder woke me up, he said. I was just checking on you. Of course you were, Maya said with a smile. Come here. He climbed onto the bed just like he used to when he was small. A minute later, Sola appeared in the doorway. She was holding her old burnt blanket. The same one she had carried since the station. It was patched in 100 places now, but she still would not give it up. There is room for one more, Maya said. Sola climbed in and curled up against her side, and then Neth appeared. She did not pretend to have an excuse. She just walked in and found her spot like she had never stopped doing this. Maya lay there in the dark with 3 not so small anymore children pressed against her. Egg was pretending he was only there to protect the others. Sola had her blanket wrapped around all of them, had her head on Maya's shoulder, and was already half asleep outside. The storm raged on, but inside the little house, everything was warm and safe and quiet. Maya remembered a night 5 years ago. She remembered walking through frozen corridors with 3 tiny hearts beating against her chest. She remembered the cold creeping into her bones as she gave all her warmth away. She remembered thinking that she might die, but knowing that she would not stop. And she remembered the promise she had made in the dark. She had kept that promise every single day for 5 years. She had kept it, and she would keep it for the rest of her life. The cubs were not cubs anymore. They were children growing into young adults. Someday they would grow up and have their own lives. But they would always be hers, and she would always be theirs. That was what it meant to be family, not blood or species or culture, just love. Held tight and never let Geomaya closed her eyes and pulled her children closer. The storm passed over the mountains and faded into the night. In a small house on a world that was not her birth home, a human mother slept. She slept knowing that she had done something good with her life. She had saved 3 children and given them a home. She had fought the entire galaxy for them and won, and tomorrow she would wake up and make breakfast and break up arguments and help with homework. She would do all the small, boring things that parents don't. She would love every minute of it, because that was the secret after all. Not the grand gestures or the heroic moments, but the long haul, The years of showing up and holding on, the countless ordinary days that led up to an extraordinary life. Maya-chan had walked through fire and ice for her children, but more importantly, she had stayed, and that, in the end, was what made all the difference.